From the CBS2 investigators, 2 Chicago police officers have been issued suspensions for their role in this violent altercation with a student in a high school hallway. The incident ultimately led to dozens of campuses to remove their school resource officers. And that
Let's just stop right there for a second. This unruly, like completely out of control teen girl, I mean, whatever, fighting with the resource officer at this one school caused dozens of other schools to remove their resource officer. I mean, something is wrong with the hardware. It's not the software. It's not redlining. It's not the legacy of this, and it's not lead in the paint. None of that stuff, man. This is a hardware issue. Okay? This is stuff that came with the box, man. %95 of shootings in schools, and I'm not talking about somebody write a manifesto and come and spray a bunch of people. No, I'm talking about students that are beefing with each other and they shoot at each other. 90% of that happens in son schools. In about the same percentage of the fights and brawls and riots happen at those same schools. And because this one girl got an incident, that just, I mean, look, what?
From the CBS2 investigators, 2 Chicago police officers have been issued suspensions for their role in this violent altercation with a student in a high school hallway. The incident ultimately led to dozens of campuses to remove their school resource officers. And that's not all. CBS2 investigator Dave Savini uncovers just how often kids are getting criminalized in the classroom and which schools do it the most.
All right, go. Watch as Chicago police respond to a violent altercation. At least a dozen officers head inside this building where it's all still unfolding. A 16-year-old girl is on the ground as 2 other police officers already stationed in her high school, called school resource officers or SROs, try to handcuff her.
And as you can see, one of the officers, both of them son people, but one of them is a son woman, a Sistah, and the other one is a son man. And they clearly have this girl pinned down. It's over. She lost. A reasonable person would just either submit to handcuffs or submit to being detained or allow these people to do their job. That's reasonable. But you rarely get that from son teens, son people.
I didn't deserve it.
Did she deserve it, y'all? What if she deserved it too if she didn't?
I didn't deserve it.
It all started around 9:45 in the morning. Denigma Howard, a junior at Marshall High School in 2019, can be seen in a hallway as an officer approaches her over a disciplinary matter for having a cell phone out in school. School security video shows how things quickly escalate.
It caught me off guard at first.
What was he saying to you right at that moment when you turned away?
He was like, you either go to in-school suspension or you leave. And I walked away.
So an authority figure, like the ultimate authority figure, a dude with a gun, paid by the state, a state-sanctioned a race soldier, ask you to either go to in-school suspension or leave the school. Like, this is East Side High. Any of y'all seen Lean On Me? The old movie about the great Joe Clark? In these schools, man, you gotta have a heavy hand, man. And listen, man, I went to these schools. I remember my junior high school principal, Mr. Millard, and his assistant principal, Mr. Long. I remember their names to this day. Okay? Why? Because they was tough, Jack. Man, listen, man. Miss Ross. I remember Miss Ross, my elementary school principal. Listen, man. In these Sun schools, I'm talking about 100% Sun schools. I'm not talking about 80%, and there's a couple of... All of the public schools I went to were 100% Sun teens, Sun people, whatever. And you can't be lean. You can't give an inch. You couldn't let us have an inch. We was like, you gave us 1/10 of a centimeter, a macrometer. We was going to take that. We was going to take over the school. Like, you had to be hard. You had to be. Okay? That's the way it is. Listen, I know you guys were like, man, you should be the kid, baby. No, they not. This is a different kind of kid. Okay? Would your kid, if your kid was at school and the resource officer came to them and said, look, man, you got a cell phone, I need you to either report to detention or leave the school right now. Would your kid just turn around and walk away? Like, whatever. Okay, and if so, then, all right, parents. But I man, look, man, I went to these schools, and I know I'm just speaking of myself. I'm not even speaking about the other kids. Okay? If you had to be hard, you had to be. Any little way we was trying to, any way man. And they were. The leadership was. The teachers that were nice got ran over, got assaulted. People, we talked in their class, we ignored them, we disrupted their classes, we turned their classes into fun time. The teachers who were hard, we listened, we did work. It just how it was, man. Sorry, pasty liberal. I know you want to fix the world and everybody. Her name is Denigma. Okay? She's an enigma.
It all started around 9:45 in the morning. Denigma Howard, a junior at Marshall High School in 2019, can be seen in a hallway as an officer approaches her over a disciplinary matter for having a cell phone out in school. School security video shows how things quickly escalate.
It caught me off guard at first.
What was he saying to you right at that moment when you turned away?
He was like, you either go to in-school suspension or you leave. And I walked away.
And then what did he do?
Pushed me down the stairs.
Denigma is grabbed by the officer and taken down toward the stairway. She goes down one flight of stairs as a second officer jumps in and then is dragged down the next flight.
Cause I'm like,
Okay, that might have been a little bit rough. Listen, man, that might have been a little bit rough, man. I mean, that might have been a little rough. Because when the... God, dog, he dragged her down a whole flight of stairs by her feet. But, when he initially grabbed her, after she walked away, he initially walked up on her, and then there was like a little like, like a little, and then he reacted to that, and then when he grabbed her, of course you saw the way she was on the ground. Like, it's not like he just grabbed her and she was like, oh my God, a cop is a man, a big 306-foot man has grabbed me, and I'm just a little girl, and he has a gun, and I guess I'm going to the office now. No, she was like, it's on. Oh, for real? Oh, word? What's up?
Cause I'm like, is this really happening?
What are you thinking at that moment as your body is going down the stairs?
I was just thinking, defend yourself. Defend. Just make sure that you don't get hurt, or to make sure that you come out alive.
And that's that warrior gene right there, man. Most people is like, all right, y'all got it. What y'all, hands behind my back? What y'all want me to do? That warrior gene kicked in.
But then came more pain. You can see one officer with a yellow taser. He repeatedly fires it as another student records it all on a cell phone camera.
It was painful, mentally, emotionally, physically. It was embarrassing for me.
In a flash, Denigma Howard went from being a high schooler to being an accused criminal charged with multiple felonies.
Now, I will tell you this, man. These cops, I would love to know what this school is like on an everyday basis, because these cops, they did, like, I think, and you know me, I'm going to call it balls and strikes, man. They was very heavy-handed with her. Yes, it got out of hand. Yes, they're reacting to her. She's like, soon as they come up on her, she's walking away. Then he goes to approach her again, and she's like, on some, stank girl time, and then he grabs her, and then she's like tussling back, and then the other cop grabs, and then they fall down the steps, and then the female cops on top of her while they're falling down the steps, and then the male cop grabs her feet and drags her down another flight of steps while the female cop is still on top of her. Then they get down, and then she's still fighting like a raging maniac. Like, she's fighting like she said, like the warrior gene kicked in, and then their warrior gene kicked in, and it was on. Then the other cop pulled out to tell you, listen, this is a good case study to let you see how quickly things can escalate, man. Like, wow. I don't think she helped herself. She didn't do herself any favors by the way she responded to every single step of the situation. However, they was rough with her, Jack.
In a flash, Denigma Howard went from being a high schooler to being an accused criminal charged with multiple felonies.
Do you think if it was not caught on camera that you might be in prison today?
Yeah.
That's a lie. Kim Fox would have never prosecuted this. That's a lie, Jack. This didn't have a chance of being prosecuted in Chicago. But, they got to do that for, the race bait.
All over a cell phone. Her father, Laurencio Howard, arrived as it happened. That's him in the blue jacket.
So you actually saw her get tasered?
Yes, and pulled down the stairs. The last landing, yes, I seen it.
What happened to Denigma Howard is just one of thousands of incidents the CBS 2 investigators have uncovered, involving CPS students getting referred to police each year for seemingly minor offenses.
They should have called her counselor, the one who deals with her and knows everything about her and how to deal with her when conflict arises.
Her father feels school staff are too quick to use police for what should be considered code of conduct or disciplinary matters, and if not properly trained, those officers can make matters worse.
Your daughter's going to jail.
They should be taught to know how to de-escalate a situation instead of escalating a situation.
We examined data CPS sent to the U.S. Department of Education. We found 7,700 Chicago public school students were referred to law enforcement during the 2017-2018 school year, the most recent year of data on file.
That's a huge number. And to try to present it as if all of them were because of this, stuff like this, is very disingenuous on their part. In Chicago, where these kids are, like, many of these kids are murderers. Many of them. About 7,700 of the kids in their school system, I mean, they have probably like 100,000, but a couple 100,000 maybe in the whole system. But about, I would say about 8,000 of them are murderers or shooters or carjackers. These ain't your average kids, man. So, like, for them to try to, like, equate this one terrible situation that got out of hand and try to make it seem like all this is because of, cops just being heavy-handed, physically heavy-handed, is disingenuous.
We found 7,700 Chicago public school students were referred to law enforcement during the 2017-2018 school year, the most recent year of data on file. We also found of the district's 457 schools, 26 chose to involve police the most, 4 times more than the district average for referring students to police.
It should be a wake-up call about SROs in schools because they're not trained to deal with teenagers, like I said, in school.
Marshall High School was one of the top schools calling the cops on students. 43% of all Marshall students were referred to law enforcement that year.
Just think about that, man. I want y'all to think about that, man. This school has thousands of kids. This is not like, some podunk high school. You got a, town population 500. You got the whole 1 K through 12 in one building. This is thousands of kids in this building. And 43% of them were referred to police at one time in that school year. And if you know anything about these inner city schools, these kids are wild, man. I'm able to detach myself from this bad incident and still be able to understand that, this incident was bad. Still.
43% of all Marshall students were referred to law enforcement that year.
Why do you think Marshall has so many cases?
They not specialized to help kids that got anger problems or that got like an IEP. That's why.
IEPs are individual education plans that provide special services or supports for struggling students.
IEPs, okay? Individual specialized support for struggling students. How many kids do you think in this place that have IEPs? It's thousands of kids. And how many you think, if 43% of them been referred to the police that year, how many of them have IEPs?
Marshall students were referred to law enforcement that year.
Why do you think Marshall has so many cases?
They not specialized to help kids that got anger problems or that got like an IEP. That's why.
IEPs are individual education plans that provide special services or supports for struggling students. Marshall had 95 students with IEPs in the 2017-18 school year, including Denigma Howard. A whopping 44 of those teens, nearly half, were referred to police.
Do you think police officers should be in schools?
No.
Yeah, we're gonna have an ambulance look at her.
The data also shows students with IEPs district-wide were referred to police 3 times more often than all other students.
Wire cutters, Jimmy?
EMS crews had to be called to Marshall to remove the taser wires and probes still embedded in her body.
Here, lean forward a minute. We're just trying to get all this stuff off of you.
She was taken away in an ambulance with injuries to her chest and neck and then charged with 2 counts of felony aggravated battery.
Police in schools leads to the criminalization of black and brown students and is a pipeline to the criminal justice system.
Who thinks this brother, this sun glider, would go into that school without no police? To stay in that school for a considerable amount of time when there was no police. Would be there and something kick off. One of the kids just don't like the cut of his jib. Or they decide he's going to be the amusement for, they bored. They just going to talk about his bald head. And he going to be like, young man, you need... he gonna be, and one of the teens square up with him. Who think this guy won't be in that place with no police around? And why is this guy not smart enough to come on the scene and be like, damn, there's police in this school? That must be for a reason. Like, why this guy got all this education and he can't put one and one together? Like, if I show up somewhere and there's a bunch of police there, I'm like, okay, like, let me just, I ain't just gonna come, hey, man, why is all these police here? Like, it must be for a reason. Like, why is he not smart enough? And why is other educated son people, why they ain't smart enough to be like, dad, here I come just showing up, popping up like a pop-up video and complaining about the police when obviously they're here for a reason, right? Or they wouldn't be here. Maybe it's a reason why they're here. Maybe it's something I gotta just sit back and look at and play the wall and, peep the scene real quick before I start telling the police to get out of here.
Police in schools leads to the criminalization of black and brown students and is a pipeline to the criminal justice system.
Andrew M. Stroth is Denigma's lawyer. He sued CPS and CPD on her behalf.
They claim she took a swing at them.
The officers on their reports falsified what happened.
He says the SROs involved, Officer Johnny Pierre and Officer Sherry Tripp, should have been the ones charged.
Well, she did take a swing at her, but wait. There's only one, man. And it was like a body punch. He got on a bulletproof vest, but
The officers on their reports falsified what happened.
He says the SROs involved, Officer Johnny Pierre and Officer Sherry Tripp, should have been the ones charged.
The police beat her, they threw her down the stairs, and then they turned to the dad and said, your daughter's going to jail. And on top of that, these officers falsified official reports that completely contradict the objective video evidence.
After the videos were released, both officers were removed from the school and disciplined. Johnny Pierre was given a 120-day suspension. Sherry Tripp, a 2-day suspension. Charges against Denigma Howard were dropped, but she says that still did not stop her pain.
Do you still hurt?
Yeah.
Howard's lawsuit settled for $300,000. Her case led to the removal of dozens of SROs at Chicago Public Schools. We got our data from the federal government, but when we asked CPS for the same data, they turned over a file that didn't match what they told the federal government. As many as 5,000 police referral cases were missing, and they won't tell us why. Dave Savini, CBS 2 Investigators.